Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll begin in 1 minute. We're going to give the other attendees to join. Let's give another 10 seconds and then we can start. Okay. So hello, everybody, and thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm Eli Ran. I'm a Senior Automation Engineer at BlazeMeter CA Technologies Company. In this webinar, we will look at how to run Selenium tests within Docker. I'll give a background about Selenium WebDriver. I'll show you test examples, and I'll talk about Docker and its usage, and I'll explain how to integrate these tests inside Docker. Just to let you know, we won't be examining BlazeMeter in depth in this webinar. It is actually an introduction for Selenium and Docker. So I'll try to stay focused as I can because we only have 45 minutes and I want to leave a lot of time for your questions. So before we begin, let me just point out that this webinar is recorded and a link to this recording will be sent early next week, likely on Monday, via email to those who registered. Keep in mind that during this webinar, you are more than welcome to raise any questions in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. At the end of the webinar, there will be 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A where you can submit questions and I'll try to answer as many as possible, as long as they are relevant to this webinar, of course. From my experience, we get many great questions, more than we have time to answer. So if you don't get your questions answered, know that your questions are being recorded and we will try to send you an answer as soon as possible. One last thing, at the end of this webinar, a very short survey will pop up asking you about your feedback about today's webinar. We will highly appreciate if you could give your feedback as well as suggest new topics for future webinars. We do actually look at the responses and they help us in making future webinars even better. You also have an opportunity to request a demo with a member of the BlazeMeter team to discuss your testing needs. I really hope you'll find this webinar valuable and practical for your needs. Let me just add that a part 2 to this webinar will take place in about a month and we'll keep you updated on the exact date. It will focus on continuous testing and what we'll talk today with integration in Jenkins and so forth, but it will be in part 2. Okay, so we are ready to begin. Let's go. The agenda for today, and first we will go over on Selenium WebDriver background. And first I give you, the main benefits and the known limitation of Selenium. Then I'll give you a bit background about Docker and its main benefits and limitations. After that, I'll show you an example of Selenium WebDriver with Docker. I'll show you the relevant open source tools that I'm using and how I generate reports using these technologies. At the end of this webinar, of course, as I promised, I will leave at least 15 minutes for your questions. So without further ado, let's begin. Selenium WebDriver background. Of course, Selenium, what is Selenium? Selenium is an open source tool that automates browsers. What you choose to do with it, the power is entirely up to you, is written in their website. Needless to say, it is an open source tool. It is primarily used for automating web applications for testing purposes. It is actually a suite of tools to automate web browsers across many platforms. And it runs on many browsers and operating systems, as well as controlled by many programming languages and testing frameworks. There are two major tools out there. Each tool has its own value. If you want to create quick bug reproduction scripts, Selenium IDE is the tool for you. It is a Firefox add-on that will simply record and playback interactions with the browser. I must say that now it's more or less deprecated, but the entire automation market is going to Selenium WebDriver, which is the successor of RC, remote control. If you want to create robust browser-based regression automation suites and tests, scale and distribute scripts across many environments, Selenium WebDriver is the right tool for you. And of course, Selenium Server Grid. It actually includes, it allows you to run tests on different machines in parallel. But we will now focus on this webinar on Selenium WebDriver. Let's continue. Let's talk about a little bit on the benefits and the limitations of Selenium WebDriver. In terms of benefits, the first point is that the fact that Selenium is an open source platform. It's a freeware and portable tool. People from all around the world are contributing to this project, and sponsors like BrowserStack, FastLabs keep joining, and the number is rising. Same as it is a benefit, being an open source, it is a limitation in a way, because since there is no official support, it means that all implementation efforts must be done on your end. Keep in mind, though, that there are endless forums and discussions on known bugs and issues in the web. So if you're having issues, if you're having bugs, you will likely to find an answer in the web. Another great benefit is the binding support of many languages, such as Java, Python, C#, JavaScript, and many, many more, as written here. There is also support for Android and for mobile. On the other side, Selenium requires experience and understanding. It can, I can say that from my experience, there always will be unexpected issues that relates to, to anything. It could be Docker, it could be Selenium, it could be your browser, it could be your operation system, it could be anything. So, supporting all these browsers is not an easy task. And same goes for the supported platforms. Selenium supports Windows, OS X, Linux. But on the other hand, you also need to be in sync with their ongoing updates. Same goes for the browsers updates. So it also provides you a big value for the continuous integration development. If you want to implement it in Jenkins or some other continuous integration development tool. And also on the downside, there is no report capability for Selenium, so you will have to install a third-party plugin to view the reports. I see that you have a question now, but let's just wait a little bit, and I promise that I will go over all your questions later on. Let's just move on to the most interesting stuff that I want to get to. So let's talk a little bit about Docker and give you a bit background about Docker. So for those who are not familiar, Docker in a nutshell is a software containerization platform. It provides abstraction of operating system level virtualization. Everything is containers, but what is a container actually? Well, as shown in the logo, you see below, the whale is holding container on his back. So these are the containers that I'm referring to. In high level, containers contain the real operating systems, Linux, for example, the software that you build, the dependencies that you run software, the environment variables, and anything that you think is relevant to the container. It is very handy in terms of automation testing, and I will soon show you how everything is connected. And unlike virtual machine, containers include the application and all its dependencies, but share the kernel with other containers. So running as isolated process, user space on the host operating system, the Docker containers are not tied to any specific infrastructure. They run on any computer, on any infrastructure, and in the cloud as well, such as Windows, Mac, Linux, Microsoft Azure, Amazon, and more and more. This is in a nutshell how the container is built. Let's move on to the benefits and limitation of Docker. A great benefit is that Docker is an open source platform, of course. You can find lots of Docker images under Docker Hub, which we will soon talk about, as well as get lots of information from the web. But you will not get official support, as mentioned, same as Selenium. When it comes to continuous deployment and testing, Docker can ensure consistent environment from development to production. It's configured to maintain all configuration and dependencies internally. Once you have proper environment, you can run your deployments, and in our case, your tests fast and easy. Of course, in order to create stable Selenium tests running under Docker, you will need an expertise and great knowledge. But on this webinar, I will show you how you can start doing this, and it will give you a sense of how you can use Selenium inside Docker. So before we continue, I just want to show you that, Docker has a security benefit. It's isolated, but of course the speed of the Docker is its limitation, because it's fast, but if you want a bare metal speed, you need to use a bare metal speed, of course. And working with the data storage is rather complicated. But as I said, on this webinar, we will focus on how to run Selenium tests in Docker and not understand everything about Docker at this point. Let's continue. So there are different tools Docker provides, like native support, such as Mac, Windows, and Linux, as I mentioned before. And there is another tool which is called Docker Hub. If you go to hubdocker.com, you will see that you have a lot of Docker images that I will soon talk about. And there is also a Docker Cloud, which provides, you can store all your private containers out there, and then you can use them for your company or for your needs. So it's more or less like Docker Hub, but it's not public. It's like your private repository for containers. And there is another Docker Compose, just for the terminology and just for you to understand, where you can mix and match different kinds of containers. You can link and you can perform different kinds of operations. So let's continue. Here is a big picture and the open source tools that I am using in my automation testing. So first, we'll need to install Python language. I use Python, and this is the language that we are creating tests with. And of course, we need to add Selenium package into our project. We need to bind it with Python. On top of that, for the testing framework, I'm using PyTest, but you can use unit test, you can use Nose, you can use whatever works for you. On top of that, of course, there is a binding for Chrome driver, Gecko driver, which is Firefox, and headless testing. It used to be Phantom, but in last March or April, something like this, Phantom.js developer said that he is no longer developing is Phantom.js, and now we are moving on to Chrome headless. And in the webinar that I talked previous webinar that I had, I talked about headless testing. And later on, I will give you also link to headless testing as well, if it's interesting you. And on top of all of that, we have Docker or virtual environment. The difference between two of them is that Docker will eventually run on a continuous integration environment, and the virtual environment meant for your own local machine where you want to debug your tests, where you want to check them, because with Docker, it's a little bit hard to debug your tests. The virtual environment will give you the opportunity to debug your tests. On top of everything, we want to implement all of our tests inside Jenkins. For example, you can use TeamCity, you can use other continuous integration tools. And the relevant plugins that I'm using are GitHub, of course, Allure Report for report generation, and Slack for getting notifications about tests that passed and failed. So this is the big picture, as I said, and this is how I built my test. Let's move on to the Docker prerequisites. Let's, after explaining about Selenium and Docker, let's roll up our sleeves and do some actions. So take your computers, take your screen, and now let's do some fun stuff. So first we need to install is Docker. Simply, you need to go. Let's just share my screen, and I go to Docker website, and I will look for the download community edition. It's more than enough for now. If you have more requirements, additional requirements, you can use the professional Docker. But you want to download the Docker. So Docker community. Okay. Community edition download. Yeah. So according to your environment, a specific platform, you need to download for Mac. If you have a Mac, if you have Windows, you need to download this Docker. At the end, you will see something like this once you install it, the Docker platform, and you will see that Docker is actually running. Let's take this, and when I click Docker -help, you will see that it is installed in my environment. So after we install the Docker, let's use some famous commands. So as I mentioned before, we have Docker help, and we also have Docker run that runs the commands in a new container. Docker start and stop starts one or more containers, and vice versa. Docker build and Docker PS that lists all our processes running in your Docker. So let's see what Docker images I have, because an image, as I explained before, is like an isolated machine that has all the prerequisites that needed for your Selenium test to be run. So this is an example of the images that existed in my computer. And for the sake of this webinar, we will not use them. We actually will remove them. So let's do it together. The command for remove these images is Docker RMI. I'm copying the images ID one by one. And you will see that now they are being deleted. And if I do Docker images right now, you will see that I don't have any images created for our Selenium tests at the moment. Let's continue. So these are like the famous commands of Docker, but as I mentioned before, I don't want to get really inside the depth of Docker and their commands. I want to be focused on Selenium and how to run them in Docker. So let's start with creating our first Selenium tests. Here is a repository that I have created. Of course, that everything can be seen. It is a public repository as well. And everything that I'm showing you here, everything is in this URL. Soon I will send you an actual URL, and everything that I'm talking about is right here. So later when I finish the webinar, you can go ahead and look at everything, how it's being written. Let's go over the code a little bit. If I created here Blaze demo application, for example, and I have here a folder which called tests. Inside the folder, I have one test. This is how the test looks like. Don't be afraid. It's very, very simple. You have here just import of a little bit of functions. Very easy. I'm importing PyTest, okay, and I'm importing by from Selenium. I have here few functions. We don't need to get into this at all. I just, you know, in the big picture, I'm explaining to you what I have here. It could be any test that you want, and here is a fixture that we are using, Open Blaze Demo. It's a website, and here we are just asserting the several pages, and we make sure that it is working. So let's just see that it is actually working. Yeah. Of course, that I need to clear my Python compiled files, because when running Docker, it will not work. And now it's working. So as you can see, the Chrome opens and it runs, and all of the tests are being executed. And this is the test that I have created. And of course, I added also one failed test just on purpose, and I will show you later why. So once you have your test created, you want to export the requirements txt. This is a very important step when you want to implement your test inside Docker. So what I did, you know, in order to create the requirements, I did a pip freeze to requirements txt. Just see where I am. I'm here. I want to activate my virtual environment. So this is what I did. Oh, sorry. Pip freeze, and the requirements will look more or less like this. I see that you have questions, and I will take them later on, of course. Once we have requirements txt, we can move ahead. We can move ahead to create our base Docker file to support Selenium, Chrome, and Firefox. So what I have here is a Docker file. Right here, I put it Selenium base image, and I created the Docker file. This is the actual Docker file that I have created by myself. And what it does actually, it creates a new machine, a new isolated container with everything that I need in order to run Selenium test with Chrome. As I mentioned before, there is also Docker Hub. And Docker Hub, as you can see here, is like a public repository for containers. So when you see this, instead of doing this more or less hard work, you would have the possibility to search in hubdocker.com Selenium. And once it will work, you will see that you have like 1,832 repositories, containers that you can use for Selenium. So you can use standalone Chrome, you can use headless, you can use anything you want. You simply click on it, and once the internet will work, what you need to do is to copy this Selenium standalone Chrome. You will go here, and in the Docker file, you will write from Selenium standalone Chrome, and it will pull the image, the image from the cloud, from the Docker Hub repository. There is a benefit for this, where you don't have to handle this stuff by yourself, but there is also a limitation that the benefit is actually a limitation as well, because you want sometimes to control your own container and to add things by yourself. It would be hard a little bit at the beginning, but I tell you from my experience, once you're flowing with this, it will be easy. So it will be simple and easy. And of course, if you have DevOps engineers next to you, give them a small questions, and they will. I'm sure they will be gladly help you, assist you with the Docker initialization. Sorry. So here, as you can see, is a Docker file where I create everything that I need for my Selenium and Chrome container. There are several packages here, and I actually say specifically which version I want, because this part is very, very, very important. You have to state the specific version that you want, because as I mentioned before, the maintenance between the Chrome driver and the actual browsers and the Docker itself, everything together must be in sync. And one time when at a future time, when Chrome or Firefox decide to update their browsers, the Chrome driver or the Gecko driver there might be issues that arise. So you want to state the specific version of your packages. Once you're doing this part is the actual download of the Gecko driver. If you want to use Firefox, for example, and I'm adding the Firefox into my local path. Also, as well, for Chrome driver, I'm downloading the Chrome driver from here, and I'm moving it to the path of the container. After that, I'm adding the X server display. This is something that is very important, and it's something that provides a virtual display for our tests to run inside Docker. Because when you run your test in Windows or in Mac, you don't need to do this because you have an actual UI. In the Docker, in the Linux machine, you don't have UI. So this is something that you must install in order to have visual testing. Once you finish this, let's create symlinks to our Chrome driver and to the Gecko driver and add them to our actual path as well. And now we have Selenium base image that is being done here. Once we have that, we store it in the root folder, as I showed you here. This is the root folder, Selenium base image. This is the root folder, and this is where we store it. And later on, we are going to the next Docker file that we must implement, and it must support and install the requirements txt that we created before. So this is our application, and this is the Docker file that uses the base image that's created here. And what we are doing here is creating a project folder with the same code, with the name code. This is the name of the folder that I'm creating. So first of all, I'm using the Selenium base image that is created. And while I'm explaining you this, I want to do something that will take a little bit, like few minutes, but I will explain it to you while doing this. So what I'm doing here is actually running the actual scripts, and I tell them what test I want to run. Purchase ticket 5, and I want to see the verbosity of this thing. So what it is doing now, it is actually creating, it will go here, and it will create this container, this image. It will create this image, and it will take a lot of time. It will take something like 5 or 6 minutes. But it will take only for the first time this amount of time. And later on, only if you have changes, it will do another installations. If you don't have, everything will work fast. So we talked about this Docker file that it is created right now. And we are now talking about this Docker file that actually installs the requirements, what we need in order to run our tests. And it is stored in the project root. Now, to make your life easier, much easier, I have created, and you can create also, a bash script that initiates both of these Docker files. This is the it's a script that I created, run tests, and you will see that what I'm doing here is I'm declaring PyTest arguments, okay, as I did before in the terminal. I'll show you again. I'm putting tags into the images that I created. So this is the first tag of the first image that I created from the Selenium base image. And this is the second tag, the project image, where I created from this Docker file. Okay? And later on, I'm using Allure results to generate the reports. So here I'm building the tags. I'm actually building the tags according to the folders where my Docker files are being stored. And this Docker run is the actual command that I'm doing in order to run my tests. So let's check out what's up with the terminal. Yeah, it's still installing. We will get back to it later. Okay, let's explain the Docker run command. Docker run --rm means that it will remove actually the container once it's done. Okay, there is a specific image, and the container will be removed once it's done. Simple as that. This is setting up the root folder for mapping the Allure output Excel to the image folder. Okay, I will get to it a bit later. Now here I'm mapping the Blaze demo application. As you can see here, this entire folder, mapping the entire folder into this folder inside the container, which is called code. This is what I decided to call it code. Now both of these lines are for the Python and the PyTest framework, which needs a working directory and the Python path to be declared when the tests are being executed. So I'm setting that code inside my container, which is the Blaze demo application folder, is the working directory and the Python path. Now, the project image is the actual image that I created here, which is this Docker file. And then I'm using Python arguments, PyTest arguments, sorry, as I did before. Let's do a quick recap here. So as you can see here, my tests are being run. Now it took like something like 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And once it's finished, you will see that 7 tests are passed and 1 failed. It took 22 seconds. And what I'm doing here, sorry, this is the shell that I'm talking about, and this is what I'm running, run tests. And let me do it again. Scripts, run tests, and I'm pointing to the specific test. Test purchase tickets, Python, and I want to see the verbosity of everything. So if I'm doing it again, you will see that it has in its cache everything, all the images that I created before and took 5-6 minutes now does not take any time. It recognizes that you have this image stored in your own machine, and it will run as expected. Let's get back to our, now is the time to create a reporting. First, you need to create a script that generates the test results. So looking here again at our repository, I have a script that generates Allure report bash. What it does, it simply takes here from Docker Hub Allure 2. As you can see here, this is the Docker Hub, and if I look for Allure, you will see that I have many containers, many images that are being available for being used. And what I'm using is Allure 2, which is here, BT Docker Allure 2. As I mentioned before, this is something that you must use. This is something that you would make your life much easier if you will use this. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking this, copying this address, BT Docker 2 Allure, and I'm creating Allure image here. And what I'm doing now is I'm mapping the actual Allure report that's being created. As you see here, Allure results. There is an XML file as well as PNG file, because I also create screenshots here. And the XML, and this script actually takes the XML and creates another 3 folders: Allure config, Allure report, and Allure results. And later on, right now actually, I will show you how to watch this report. So let's get back to our script here. Just clear that up. And first of all, let's take a look at the images that I created just for you to understand. As you can see, BlazeMeter, BlazeDemo, App Selenium is the name of the image that I created right here. BlazeMeter, BlazeDemo, App Selenium. And this BlazeMeter Selenium framework is the one that holds everything we need in order to run our Selenium and Chrome and Firefox. It will weigh 1.5 gigabytes, each one of them. And this is the Python that we installed earlier. So let's generate the report now and see what we have. So in order to generate the report, I will need to run this generate Allure report bash. I will run it, sorry. And I want to tell it where to store the Allure results, in which folder. So the folder would be BlazeDemo application right here. I want it to be here, but I can choose wherever I want. Now it's unable to find the image, right? Because it is looking for BT Docker Allure 2, and it will take much less time than it took for the other images to be built. But we will use the Allure 2 image that has everything it needs to generate our reports. And in a minute or two, you will see that it will tell us that, tell me that the report is being generated successfully. And I will show you how we can watch the report dynamically in our own environment. So now it is being extracted. Until it is done, let me just give you another overview of this repository, because I know there are lots of things that needs to be learned. I really understand your concern, and you might say that there are a lot of things here, and even though we say that this webinar is for beginners, it's really for beginners, because I'm not going really in depth for Docker commands, and I'm not going in depth into Selenium commands. I'm just showing you the actual structure of what you need to do. And I also will give you later on the URL for the public repository where you can check out everything, how it's being structured, and how I'm creating everything. So as you can see here, the generation of the report is being successfully generated to Allure report. And what we need to do here is simply go inside this folder, Allure report. And what we want to do is we want to create like a simple Python server, simple HTTP server, and we want to show it in port 8080, for example. So serving now in the report in my local host, and if you will go to the local host, we will see this. We will see a Allure report that being generated from the XML that we created. We are seeing that 8 test cases is being executed. One of them has been failed. As you can see, we can click on the actual tests, and we can see that how much the duration took for each test to take place. And I even create a fail on purpose here. I added another unexisting Tel Aviv place, and you even can see the screenshot, as you can see here. And you can understand what happened to the test and how you can debug it later. So this is how you generate your test, and that's it actually. This is very straightforward script. Now you can use the Allure report. Of course, you can use JUnit. You can use any other plugin that you want, and you can simply open it with how I showed you before, with the server. And here is the public repository. You can just everything we talked about is written in this public repository. Just take a minute to write down this URL or screenshot this QR code, and I promise you that once you do this, it will be much more clear on how to do things. Let me just add that also here in the README file, I added how you can run those scripts inside this repository, how you can generate the Allure report, exactly what I showed you here in this webinar, what you need to do in order to serve it and to watch it. Of course, you have additional information about all the tools, all the open source tools that I'm using. Here, everything you have: Selenium WebDriver, Python, PyCharm that I'm using, IntelliJ actually, PyTest, Allure reports, virtual environments, Docker, Docker Hub, Jenkins. Everything is written here. Now, let me just say that all the references that I used for this webinar are Selenium WebDriver repository, which I used actually. Of course, the homepage of the webinar, the Docker homepage, and the Selenium Docker Allure repository, and the automated testing blog that I also created, that I also did a few months ago. And I have everything here also written where you can use and how you can implement your code and how you create your tests and implement them within Docker and within Jenkins as well. For more information, additional information about BlazeMeter, you can check out the following links and resources. You can check out our website. You can check out our Twitter, our blog, and open source tools and Gatling. And all BlazeMeter webinars and other resources are being stored here. And I really hope this webinar gave you a value, and I really thank you for listening. Just a quick reminder, there will be a very short survey, something like 30 seconds, and I would really appreciate if you can fill that out. Your feedback is very important, and as always, we're trying to get better and better. And as I promised now, this is the time for questions. So that's just give me 1 second to go over your questions and see what you have asked me to do. Okay, so there is a question here about Docker on Red Hat Enterprise needs license now. Community Edition not supported. Well, thank you, Scott, for pointing that out. Really appreciate it. And as you mentioned, Community Edition is not supported. And if you need Red Hat Enterprise support, if you have like additional requirements for your project, then you should use the Enterprise Edition of Docker, which costs money, of course, but you can do that. So good point. Thank you. Oh, you heard sirens. Sorry that there was something here in the background. Of course, I'm from my office in Israel, so there must be a small accident outside. Okay, there is a question. What is requirements TXT? Okay, let me just get back. Requirements TXT is something that it is very important. For those who are not familiar with requirements, these are all the packages that are needed in order to run our tests as needed. For example, I'm using PyTest. So PyTest is something that is a Python package that needs to be installed when you run your tests. So the requirements actually is being executed. Everything here in the requirements is being done when we initiate our Docker file. We install the requirements that we have created here. So it's very important that you create your requirements from the virtual environment that you created in order for the Docker file to install everything you need for your tests. So this is the significance of the requirements TXT. Okay, so there is a question. Could you please tell us what is the editor you are using? This is IntelliJ. IntelliJ with Ultimate. Actually, my company is CA Technologies. Provide a license, and this is actually very easy to use, very something that very common in the market of IDEs for creating Python, and it supports PyTest and also Docker and a lot of other good stuff. So let's go over for another question. How do you manage the project dependencies? Is it via Docker file as well? Okay, let me just see if I completely understand your question. The project dependencies. Okay, the project dependencies are something that is being held inside the Docker file. The Docker file, as I mentioned in a previous slide, is being stored in the root directory. Now, here is the local Docker file with all the dependencies that I have created. As I mentioned before, instead of using all of this, I could simply remove everything, not use this, but simply use from and go to Docker Hub and search for Selenium. Selenium. And Selenium, for example, something that I use is standalone Chrome debug, 1 million pulls. So you can see that's something that's very, very common. Simply copy this, and that's it. That's it. Selenium standalone Chrome debug. And instead of maintaining all of this file, I have this, and then I can use it. So the dependency depends on what I'm using. As I told you before, I prefer doing this on myself because I have the possibility to control everything in my container. I don't need to wait for another open deployment for the developers that are being used by other repositories. So the dependencies are stored inside the Docker file. And as you can see here, I'm installing all the Python dependencies, Gecko driver, Chrome driver, the X server, as I explained before, for the virtual display, and I create symlinks for the Chrome driver and Gecko driver. And then I'm using the other Docker file, which uses the first Selenium base image, and what I'm doing is only installing the specific requirements for the Blaze demo application. That's it. So I really hope I answer your questions, and if not, I have my email, which I show you here. This is my email, eliranshani.ca.com, at ca.com, and you are more than welcome to send me any questions that you have. Let's move on to another question. How do you connect to Selenium container so I can have access to a private network? I can't run the test because I don't have access to website from inside the container. So it's a good question from Ramona. Thank you for a question. It's a really, really good question. So the Selenium container, actually, to tell you the truth, I'm not using Docker Hub. This is one of the reasons why I'm not using Selenium container from Docker Hub. I'm using my own Docker file that I have created, and this is how I can connect to it, because I'm not under a VPN private network. Actually, Ramona, let's take it offline, because it's like an edge case, and I really would love to answer your question later on. If you can send me your private email, and we can chat later on this issue. Okay, there is another issue about my my IDE, which is IntelliJ, as I showed you before. Okay, there is another question from Barjesh Kumar. When Docker spin up, does it pull latest automation code from Git repository? Well, yes. It is a very good question. When I do this run tests, this is my test. It actually look at my local repository. It does not pull the latest automation repository from Git. If I want to do it, I simply do this git pull in my I update my project regardless of Docker. The Docker actually, the only thing the Docker does is simply create image files that requires for the test to be run. So I'm running first of all the Docker file, creates the image. If it existed, it moves on. And as you can see here, if the image existed, it will continue. If it is not existed, it will pull the latest Docker file from Docker Hub. And the actual Git, the GitHub my repository is not related to Docker at this time. Maybe in the second session that I will do, second webinar, which will take place later on, I will show you how we can use GitHub in Jenkins and how we can pull latest repositories. Let me just say that something that I didn't say. As I mentioned before, there is a quick survey. I really appreciate it if you can answer it. Another question: do you have a repo for Java Windows Stack as well? Well, Rajat Su, thank you for the question. At the moment, no. I only have a repo for Python and Selenium. I have also for headless actually, and in the email that I will send all of you, and with the presentation, I will add additional repositories where you can take your knowledge from. Okay, looks like your repository is not public. I've got 404 page. I will make sure that this will be public. So thank you for letting me know. I will make sure it will be public. Let's go quickly for another question. We don't have a lot of time. Okay, how do we get a Dockerized test running from Jenkins? So this is a very good question, as I mentioned before. And in this scope of the webinar, we are not getting into Jenkins at the moment. We will do it in the second part of the webinar in like a month or two, and we will surely update you, keep you updated. And Jenkins would be in the next webinar because we don't have a lot of time. I really thank you very much for your questions. Let's see if we have another time for another question. Yeah, can we get access to the presentation and the code? Of course. If you say that you don't have access, I will make sure that you do have access to this public repository, and I also send you, and I also give you the URL and the presentation and everything that you that can assist you with running the test. How much different this from the Java implementation? It shouldn't be much more different. Very good question, Ashen Chutwi. I think I'm saying your name correct. So the question was, again, let me repeat, how much different to this is the Java implementation? Well, it should be quite similar to Python, because the Docker structure is something that should be the same in all programming languages. As long as you have a base image where you create the requirements for running Chrome and running Firefox and running the Linux and the Python packages that you need, and the other Docker file which simply installs the requirements in your repository from a repository. So it should not be much different from the other programming languages that are supported with Selenium. Let's move on. Another question about Jenkins and Docker, as I mentioned before, it would be in the upcoming webinar in a month or two. Have you documented the steps for Selenium Java? Well, I have documented everything here for Python tests, as I mentioned. Python and PyTest, and let me just show you again the relevant open source tools that we are using. Python, PyTest, Selenium WebDriver. So if you want to implement these tests on your end, you can simply use these infrastructure, and you can go ahead and check out the blog that I've written here about the steps on how to create new Jenkins job, new tests, run them with Docker, without Docker, whatever you want. And you can simply go this website and the blog. You can go to Blazemeter blogs, and you can search whatever you want. And if it's related to Selenium, I have lots of blogs, and I actually did several webinars, and you can find them in the resources. And you can understand how to driving headless Chrome with Selenium and Python. And we have a lot of resources that will assist you, help you to achieving your goals, your company goals, your personal goals, whatever you need. Let's move ahead with another question. I think that we're almost out of time. Um, okay, a lot of you asking about Java. Actually, I'm not using Java at the moment, but I'm sure that I will assist you in finding Java knowledge in the upcoming webinar. I'm writing this down. Okay, there is another quick question, which is nice, from Srilata Mecca. Am I able to run these tests in BlazeMeter? Well, this is a little bit out of our scope, but I will give you like a few explanation about BlazeMeter. BlazeMeter is a load is a performance testing actually for BlazeMeter, but you are able to run a lot of tests in BlazeMeter. As you can see here, we have JMeter tests, we have URL API tests, we have Taurus tests, WebDriver tests, we have API functional tests, we have proxy recorder, we have Chrome, we have Chrome browser tests that you can run and record. You can run those tests inside a Taurus test, actually, if you export it to a YAML file. And if you really want to see how you can do it, you simply go to guide.blazemeter.com and you can search for Taurus PyTest. And I think that Taurus Python you have here something that is creating new Taurus test. So this is a YAML file, but it's a little bit out of our scope, but once you create YAML file and you point it to the relevant test, you are able to run your test inside BlazeMeter. I think that we have time for a last question. Where is the survey? The survey, once we are done with this webinar, there is a 30 seconds pop-up survey, and we will push it if you can answer it, and you can schedule a demo with one of our members of our BlazeMeter team, and you can contact me if you have any question regarding automation tests. And I think that that is it. I really thank you for joining this webinar of today. And as I mentioned, we will send you the recording very soon, like in the Monday or something. And I really thank you for joining me. And I hope to see you in the next webinar. I really hope this webinar was valuable to you. See you next time. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.